Hi everyone, my name is Ross the Alcheminiaturist, and today I'm making an Imperial Navigator. You know, those cool quirky dudes that have that navigator gene in there, able to basically navigate the warp for any and all starships of the Imperial Army. So let's get into it. As I wanted my navigator to have a Mechanicus-type feel to him, I took the Station Forge Scavenger Hunter body and blue-tacked it to a 32mm base. Next, I took Kazgan Drakskewer, a Sky Warden model from the Warhammer Underworld's warband Thundrix Profiteers, and chopped off his balloon. This balloon would serve as my navigator's head. The normal models for the navigators have these weird triangle-looking heads, so it kind of fit, you know? I took the right arm of a tech priest Domius and chopped off his hand and cane. I had quite the time using super glue and baking soda to try to get his arm to stay in the correct spot, but after a valiant fight, the arm lost. Next up was a backpack that I am so totally sure came from a Mechanicus model, so we're gonna go with that. It's a Mechanicus backpack. For the left arm, I used an arm from the Cataphren Breachers. In my city, my favorite local game store runs a bit swap every couple of times of a year, and I go and grab all the random bits that I can, because why not? And they always make good kit bashing materials, this arm being one of them. For the right hand, I used the rock drill hand from the Gene Stealer Cult's Acolyte hybrids and glued the power cable to the backpack. I stole Fabius Bile's Doc Ock arms and added them to the backpack. When I get to painting, one of them falls off, and I don't actually get back to putting it on, so let's just pretend that there's only one arm there. Thanks. Finally, I started on the base. I mixed up a little ball of green stuff, being careful to make sure that all of my tools, as well as my gloves, were covered in lotion to make sure that the green stuff didn't stick to anything. Once the green stuff was all mixed together and rolled into a ball, I dabbed a little blob of super glue onto the base and then placed that green stuff on it. Interestingly, super glue and green stuff nearly instantaneously bonds together, so I didn't have to worry about the glue when I flattened the green stuff on top of the base. I then took my 3D printed roller with a metal plating pattern on it and rolled it firmly but gently on top of the base to get the imprint of the pattern onto the green stuff. Then I left the base to cure for 24 hours. 24 hours later, it was time to paint. I primed both parts, the model and the base, with AK's black primer. I then took Vallejo's medium sea gray and dry brushed it all over the model and the base. After that, I took Vallejo's dead white and dry brushed that, only on the places on the model and the base that I wanted it to be more highlighted than the rest of the model. Next up, I took Citadel's Leadbeltcher for metal, and both the base and the metal of the navigator were painted. I thinned the paint down, however, to try to make sure that the dry brushed edges and highlights were still semi-visible. I then took Citadel's Blood Angel contrast paint and applied it to the clothing of the navigator, again going for a bit of the Mechanicus aesthetic. Citadel's Mephiston Red was used for some of the cables. Next up was Akryl's bright gold for the head / dome / thing, as I really liked how the head looked before I primed it, and so I wanted it back the way it was. Again, I thinned down this paint to get some of the highlighting through. I then took Citadel's Warp Lightning contrast paint for the rest of the cables, as well as the visor slash faceplate of the helmet. Citadel's Wrathbone was then used for the hand, as I wanted a very pale hand that looked almost deathly. I mean, it's attached to straight metal, and so probably wouldn't get the most nutrients, so it's probably dying, right? I then used Citadel's Space Wolf Grey contrast for armor plates on his right arm slash shoulder. Also, why is the grey blue? It's not grey. It's a lie, that's what it is. I then took some Citadel's Rhinox Hide Brown for the pouches that he has on the front of his body. Citadel's Agrax Earthshade was first taken for the clothing and patches to give it more depth and a more earthy, worn feeling to them. Like, no matter how hard he tries, these clothes are stained. I then took my second favorite shade, Citadel's Nuln Oil, for all of the absolute rest of both of the model as well as the base. Because honestly, Nuln Oil is best used for any and all metal items on a model. And, well, I mean, he's mostly metal, so he mostly gets Nuln. It's simple math. Metal plus Nuln Oil equals winning. Once the washes were done and dry, I went over the edges of the cloth with more of the Mephiston Red just to give a little bit of highlight. And with that, the Imperial Navigator was done. And now for the beauty shot. If you made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really helps me out. Until next time, happy kit bashing.